And we are back talking about the Oklahoma Sooners and their upcoming bowl game with Florida State. And today I am joined by Jay with Unfair Sports. How you doing this morning?
What's going on, PG, man? Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about this bowl game.
You know what? I talked to you about it in the green room, but I'm excited about it, but I'm not excited for maybe what the result could be, especially with all the opt-outs we have in Florida State not apparently having a ton of opt-outs here. It's kind of scaring me a little bit, but you said we might have a little Sooner magic. So, but before we get into it, I want you to tell everybody where they can find you.
Oh, yeah. Just search for me on YouTube, Unfair Sports. You know, we do content just like PG talking, OU football. We've got a little Colorado in there and college football in general. So it's great to have you all over there at the family or whatnot. And, add us to your rotation with PG.
Yes. Add us to the rotation. So let's take the deep dive into it. So Oklahoma got a bowl game that I think nobody really expected us to get. A lot of us were looking at potentially playing Arkansas or going out to Phoenix or Memphis, and none of those games kind of really panned out. And ultimately, we get Florida State in the Cheez It Bowl, a lot better of a game than maybe we deserved at 6-6. But I think they bowl committee or whoever puts these bowl games together looked at it and saw Oklahoma as a better team than 6-6. And, Florida State's probably a better team than 9-3. If you go look at their schedule, they've played a lot of close games this year. And if they didn't have some injuries, they potentially could have been a team that was sitting with one loss at the end of the season, maybe potentially looking at a college football playoff berth. But ultimately, both teams are coming in. Florida State with 3 losses, Oklahoma with 6. And they look very similar in terms of on-field numbers. Florida State's doing about 475 yards a game. Oklahoma's doing 472. But Florida State's about 4 points better on the offensive side and a whole 10 points better on the defensive side of the ball. So you could give Florida State almost a whole 14-point advantage over Oklahoma in this game just to start. So kind of want to hear some of your thoughts about this game.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, Oklahoma lucked out with getting the opportunity to play in this bowl game at 6-6, and it's mainly because we got TCU playing in the playoffs. So this kind of helped Oklahoma move up the charts of teams that they wanted to have in a game like this. I am still surprised that we got to get the Cheez It Bowl at this record. The last time we were here in Orlando playing at Camping World Arena was back in like 2014. And it was funny. I was actually in Orlando that weekend as well. I went to Disney with my kids because of a trip that I won at my old job back then. And so it's kind of fascinating that once again, Oklahoma gets out there. But back then we were 8-5. So not too, 7-5 basically. So it was not too far off from what we are today. And I think it's going to be a good one. The ACC actually had some really good teams this year, and I think that's why Florida State fell like they did because, Wake Forest had a solid year, so did Clemson, so did North Carolina State for the most part, and so because of the way that they trickled down, we met right in the middle. And outside of that, man, I'm stoked to see what it's going to look like because in this game, to me, I've always been cool with players opting out, especially ones going to like the draft, when it's a bowl game that's not part of the championship run. This is a great opportunity to see the young guys. We can see what they're about, what they're made of. We can see the future play today. And we can also see those players and wonder, hey, this guy probably ain't gonna get much game time, or this guy's gonna get a lot of game time next season because they're gonna be playing under the lights, under the microscope, in front of thousands of people, because it's going to be on national television. It's a bowl game. So it's a neutral site. It's going to be a great chance to see what these players are made of. So I'm pretty excited about it. But like you said, there's potential for a blowout. I just did a live stream last night with TJ Pittinger over at the Double Fries No Slaw show, Florida State pod. And yeah, they have 0 opt-outs for Florida State. 0. I don't think I've ever seen that before. But they also are very young. Like, they're a very young roster when you go actually look at their depth chart. Like, I'm looking at it right now. I was in shock when I looked at it. I was like, y'all are, like, really, like for real, young. Like there's not very many of y'all that are upperclassmen, and so I mean, besides Jordan Travis, they have a good chance of teaching us a lesson.
Yeah, and one of the things that you see with Florida State is the guys that aren't playing in the bowl game, they've hit the portal. They were people that weren't really producing for Florida State anyways. But one of my concerns going into this game for Oklahoma is the run game. So Florida State doesn't have just one or two, but they have three great running backs in Benson, Ward, and I'm going to probably say this wrong, Tofili, and
yep.
I mean
Tofili, yeah.
Tofili, yeah, and they can get 100 yards. I think at one point all three of those guys got 100 yards in one game this season. Like literally in one game, they've all got 100 yards. So yeah, that's absurd, and that's the one I think area that I would be concerned about for the Sooners. I'm actually not worried about the passing game as much because you have CJ Colden, you have Billy Bowman, you have Key Lawrence, you have Justin Harrington, and I feel like the secondary is probably the strong point of this Oklahoma defense this year, which is mind-blowing to say that, but I mean it is. I'm more worried about the upfront protection and how they're going to be able to stop the run game for Florida State.
Yeah, looking at Florida State, they're the number 12 running offense in the country. We're 13. So, yeah, they can run. And we know how well we run. They're one step ahead of us. And so, yeah, that was a big concern for me when talking to TJ. I made mention that because he asked us, hey, what do you believe is the one thing you would prefer Florida State to do against yours? And I was like, pass it. Because we don't have any opt-outs in the secondary. That only concern I truly have is that Jordan Travis is really good with his feet. He doesn't run much anymore, but he keeps the play alive. And so if the pass game's going to be a concern, it'll be because he'll get 6 to 7 seconds to basically rip up our secondary. We need to get a ton of pressure on him. Run game wise, yeah, we give a lot of run yards too. I would rather them pass than run because I think that when they run the ball, they're going to rip. Like you said,
yeah,
they're good. They had 3 running backs hit 100 yards in one game. That tells me everything I need to know about how good of a running game they are. That's where I am probably the most nervous. Now, with the young players potentially playing more like at the linebacker position, we may see more Kip Lewis and a little bit of Kobe McKenzie. If we see both of them really get some game out there with Owigbe and Stutzman, I may not be as concerned at that point, especially since we should see Grayson Halton play this game too. Now, since Jalen Redmond is going to be out, since he'll be prepping for the draft, I would like to see. I'm hoping that helps our defensive line and our front. And in this game, we'll probably see a heavy combination of 4-3-3-4. I'm at 4-3 and then 3-3-5 because we've got to stop that run.
Well, and that's actually a good point that you bring up. It's something I forgot to mention. The redshirt rule has actually been pulled by the NCAA for this year.
For the bowl games, for this year, yeah.
Meaning
they're going to let
your guys can play more than 4 games this year just by playing the bowl game, right? And that's not going to impact the redshirt. So I would expect to see a lot of Kobe McKenzie, Kip Lewis, Robert Spears-Jennings, Jaden Gibson on the offensive side of the ball. You said Grayson Halton, and we are missing R. Mason Thomas on the edge. I would expect to see a lot of those guys because BV's probably going to throw them out there to get good game reps, but also he wants to see what these guys are made of against, I would say I'm not going to say like elite, but they're borderline getting there. Florida State's starting to come back, and they're coached really well under Mike Norvell, a really disciplined team. So, when we look at secondary again, I forgot to mention Woody Washington because that dude's a dog as well. But I think it all comes down to your linebacker play for Oklahoma because I feel like your secondary, again, was a strong point, but the defensive line I don't think was terrible. And the linebackers could have probably potentially covered up some of those defensive line mistakes if the linebackers would have just been better. And the linebacker room, I think, was a disappointment this year. Now,
I'd say our biggest problem was consistency. It was being inconsistent on the is being on the defensive line. That was our biggest problem. Was just not every down making the plays that we should have made. We made enough of them, but of course, every time they would get us, we would get gutted in third down. And it's funny, a few people made comments of, yeah, if it's 3rd and 12, Florida State will be fine. And I'm just like, yeah, you're probably right. That's the only thing that sucks. So I'm expecting more. I'm hoping for more when they put in Grayson and some of the younger defensive linemen that we brought in the recruiting class. I'm hoping they go out there and toss some folks around.
Yeah, and I'm also curious to see what we're going to get out of Dillon Gabriel this game, because he's had a pretty up and down year, and he's been inconsistent at times. Now, I would put some of that on the wide receivers as well. I will echo that till I die in my grave. It's not all on Dillon Gabriel, but I am curious to see what kind of Dillon Gabriel we get. Do we have a couple of those quarters where, he's able to make short passes, but when it comes to downfield stuff, we're either overthrowing it, or like just the connection's not there, or is Dillon Gabriel going to come out and light up these wide receivers? I don't know. He's back in Orlando, and he played well in Orlando, so maybe this is the turning point for him.
Yeah, no, that's what we're going to be hoping for. Good thing is with Mims playing, and of course the expectation is Mims is going to be back next season. Drake Stoops announced he's going to be back next season, and so I'm anticipating we'll see a lot of Mims with no Theo Weeds, a lot of Farouk, and this is going to be Farouk's opportunity to truly come out. This is the game. If Farouk wants to show that he is a number one or potential number one, especially the moment that Mims leaves, this is the game for him to do it. I'm expecting to see a lot of Jaden Gibson out there. We need to get him heavily involved, even as a freshman, 6'5", you've got the size, he has the speed. We've seen it from him. This is the game for him to come out too. So I actually think that Dillon Gabriel's going to carve this defense open, him and Levy, especially a combination of the pass and run game. Barnes should do good, and we should see some Sawchuk and some Tyree Walker in this one because, me and you talked about it in the green room. I'm at a 1% on Marcus Major playing because of the injuries that he's been sustaining all year. So because of that, I definitely see that this is the game that Gabriel breaks out for real, and that Levy lets him just sling it. Just let him go out there and throw it. Don't be afraid. Who cares? I know that we want this probably as bad as Florida State does. I mean, Florida State wins this game, it gets them 10 wins. That's a huge accomplishment, and it's a great feel-good going into next year. For us, we're playing to keep the streak alive of 500 of a record of 500 or more every year since Stoops took the job in 99. And so because of that, we're going to be pushing heavy to make sure we win this game. And so if that's the case, Levy's got to go out there and throw that thing. Let him throw that thing. Let Dillon Gabriel be Dillon Gabriel. Let him scramble. I want him to run more too, and do everything possible to not let Jared Verse eat you alive.
And you mentioned Jaden Gibson, but I'm curious to see if Nick Anderson is healthy enough to play in this game as well, and if we're going to see a lot of him, because that's a guy that we haven't seen. I don't think have we seen him at all this season for Oklahoma?
No, I don't think he's played a single game this year, which I understand. I kind of didn't expect to see much of Nick this year as a freshman. I think he's good. I think that he just needed to, like most freshmen, get prepared for the collegiate level, and talent-wise, we have a lot. So I didn't expect to see much of him at all anyway, because he's more of your bookend. He's an X or Y. He's not really your Z. Even though if you put him at the Z, he could be really dangerous. But we've got enough of those. We've got Gavin Freeman. We've got Drake Stoops. We got LV Bunkley Shelton. He's going to be probably seeing some game too. So we got a lot of youth at wide receiver, which when I looked at the depth chart for the game, I was kind of shocked. I was like, man, we really do got a lot of like sophomores and freshmen at wide receiver right now. And yeah, because LV Buckley Shelton is a redshirt sophomore. I expect to see some of him mixed in with Drake Stoops at the slot. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, and, another player or a couple players I think Oklahoma fans really need to be watching, because this is not only an area of need for this game, but it's an area of need for next year. And that's the left side of the offensive line. So you're losing Anton Harrison, you're losing Wanye Morris. And the questions here are the guys that you currently have that are tenured through this sport, are they able to come in and make an impact and fill those holes? Additionally, I would expect we're going to see some Jake Taylor and Jacob Sexton in this game. And I want to see what they're going to look like. I want to see, are they going to be able to step in next year and be those guys that we need them to be? Or, are we going to have to hit the portal and try to find some more offensive linemen? And I think that's probably going to be something Bill Bedenbaugh looks at this week as well.
Yeah, it's true. Bedenbaugh's got some work to do. And I'm kind of curious to see how our freshman comes out there and Jacob Sexton. I'm pretty stoked to see him play. We're getting back to the trenches that we used to have on the offensive line. I truly expect a Joe Moore Award in the next 3 years, and I'm pretty stoked about it. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we will see. What's your score predictions for the game?
Got to be a homer, so I'm going to say 43-42 Oklahoma, game-winning field goal. I think it's going to be a shootout.
I think it's going to be a shootout, too, just because the both have the thing is, though, there's about 150-yard difference between Florida State's defense and Oklahoma's defense. So that could potentially play a factor. But, no, I'm right there with you. I'm going to say 45-42 Oklahoma.
Now, this is my guy TJ over there at the Double Fries No Slaw show made a good point that with Florida State, they do very good against bad offenses, and they have not done very well against good offenses. And so that's the thing that he was really intrigued about. Most of Florida State people are. Those 3 losses they had was to Wake Forest, North Carolina State, and Clemson, who all 3 have really good offenses when they're clicking on all cylinders. DJ Uyangalele actually had a really good game against them.
Hey, no, don't say that. People might crucify you for that. They don't like
nobody likes DJ for some reason. I think DJ is okay. I think he's a college quarterback. I just don't think he worked in that Clemson system. That's more so built around. I think that offense is built around a quarterback that's more mobile, and DJ is really not a mobile quarterback. And I think that's why he just didn't work out in that. They need a world beater at quarterback, and that's not that man's game. His game is to be a pocket passer and go. So, yeah, and they didn't have the greatest run game this year either, but I'm intrigued to see them play Tennessee later, though.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what their game's going to be like with Cade Klubnik at the helm for a full game.
Yeah. And so Florida State playing them, that game was a shootout, 34-28, and they lost. DJ, the run game ate up Florida State, and Benson had 69 yards rushing. So that was not a good turnout for them in tradition, and they mounted a comeback in the fourth quarter. So honestly, that game was not as close as the final score was. It was 34-14 going into the fourth. That tells you everything you need to know about how they handle a more high-octane offense, and I think we'll have that. As long as we're up there on tempo, that's the thing that's going to wear them out. Wake Forest was similar in looking at that one. That game was really all Wake Forest up until the fourth quarter when, it was 28-13 going into the fourth quarter. And so that tells you enough there, that Florida State, if you're playing against a really good offense, they're going to struggle. And I'm hoping that we can go out there and pull that out on them.
Yeah. No, I'm hoping we can go out and pull the win. I'm hoping that I'm wrong and just being a doomer, a Sooner doomer, as we like to call it, about this game. But it's just hard to see it's hard to see it after how the defense has played this year against a good running team. So we'll just have to see what they're made of.